All right, check one. Check's good. All right, it's the 49 Hemlock podcast. It's episode 51, I believe. And so here we go. We're embarking on a new series, although maybe I should qualify that because series, I think, here is going to mean something different than it's meant before. It's going to be organized a little bit differently internally, and as far as externally, it might just get broken up among other episodes. So there might always not be the next part of this series as the next podcast, if that makes sense. Anyway, I've been talking about for a while doing a series called about the mind. So I guess that's what this is. It's called Mind the Gap. And as a point of departure, as a place to get started, like I said, this is going to be organized a little bit differently. We're going to watch a clip together. There's going to be a YouTube component to this. We're going to watch a clip together. If you're listening, we'll listen to a clip together. There's only one piece of this that really requires the visual. There is some body language stuff, but it's just an interesting point. We won't dwell on it too long. We're going to watch a clip. We're going to grind our teeth and grit our teeth through a clip from a show on MSNBC, the host of which is Chris Hayes. All right, I'm going to reserve comment as much as possible about him. I don't care for him. I'm going to try to just let that come out in a constructive way. Okay. But I'll just say it. I don't care for, you'll see. Okay. So we're going to go through this clip. And like I said, this is a different way of organizing things, but I just want to take you through a conversation among several people representing in some ways several different points of view, and in some ways, as I'll argue a little bit later, a common point of view. And I want you to understand what those agreements among them, and even the disagreements, mean in terms of how you should understand what they're saying to you. Okay? I know that's a mouthful. Well, so is the project, right? This is, I think, worthwhile. Okay? And though I've said this series is on the mind, and if as far as the YouTube thing, it's probably all going to be on the mind. Actually, the first bit of this is going to just be a point that I think needs to be talked about for a moment. That's a little bit independent of the rest of it. It's not in any obvious way about the mind. It's actually about sort of just the political mood, the sort of political situation. It's a comment that the host makes. I just want to comment on it, and that's going to be the first installment here. Okay, so we're going to get on to the mind, and these folks on this panel have much to say about the mind. All right, but before they say that, it is set up with this comment about polarization. So we need to talk about polarization because I know that you've heard it said that we are more polarized than ever before, right? We're so polarized. The modern political climate is so polarized. I don't think I need to make the argument that this is a slogan that is bandied about ad nauseum, okay? I think we know that. If you don't, well then maybe what I'm saying here is not going to sound that important to you, but certainly this is a thing that we are told nonstop in the media, all right? But I want to just stop right on it before we go on to anything else, because the host of this show uses this statement. Should I just play this for a second? I mean, just listen. He uses this statement.
If our political institutions seem more dysfunctional than ever before, that's probably because they're more polarized than ever before. And we're not just talking about our perpetually deadlocked Congress. Even among voters at large, the broad center seems to be rapidly diminishing. One of the most insidious features of the kind of polarization we're seeing in America now is that it makes it difficult, if not impossible, to relate to people at the other end of the spectrum.
Okay, shall I let it go? Listen, I'm going to let it go in a minute, but I just want you to understand, like, this is what we're dealing with. All right, so look at that. Look how I can do that. We just got to deal with this right off. There's going to be more later in this segment. This panel of panelists. This panel of panelists. That's more immediately relevant to what is said to be the topic of this series, which is the mind. But what's said here is important to what they're going to argue later. Okay, so I got to address it. And to do that, look, what do we mean when we say that a thing is polarized? Well, right? It means there's more emphasis on the ends of the scale or the continuum or the spectrum or whatever, right? Than there is in the intermediate segments. So, right, and then out of this you get all these sort of analogical uses of this concept of polarity or polarization, right? When a psychologist says that someone is bipolar, bi meaning two, right? What are they saying? They're saying that a majority of that person's emotions or psychological states or moods or what have you are characterized by being near to one or two extremes, or one of two extremes, you could say, then they are characterized by being, degrees or gradations of one of those extremes. Some middling degree or gradation, right? Something neutral or somewhat neutral with respect to both of them, if that's possible. Okay, listen. So, but the important point is we immediately bring to mind this image or this concept, whatever, of a spectrum or a scale. Maybe that's better to say a scale when we talk about things being polarized. But, right? But if we leave it at that, then there's something that's missed. So in this, when people talk like this, what does it mean to say that the American electorate, the voting public, is polarized, or, again, as we incessantly hear, we're more polarized than ever before, right? And this, of course, it's always presented with great alarm, great concern, and it's almost always accompanied by some prescription, some proposal or recommendation as to how we can solve this unprecedented polarization problem. Now look, we can't know if it's a problem unless we know what it means. And what I want to get at here is that whenever they say this, there's a trick going on. Why? Because here's the core question that Chris Hayes, just as he starts there, breezes right over. We're more polarized than ever before. Are we referring to the increase in, say, the number of people holding to beliefs that are found at either end of the scale? Is that what we mean by polarized? Or do we mean, bear with me, do we mean that the beliefs themselves that are now found at the ends of the scale are themselves more extreme, whatever that means? Hold that, okay? More extreme than the positions which used to be found at the end of the scale. Is that what we mean by polarized? I want you to think about this for a moment and notice that this question is not answered. You're just told we're more polarized than ever before, and as you'll see, much follows. So what does it mean to say that the voting public is polarized, let alone more polarized than ever before? When someone says this, are they saying that there are now more people holding to beliefs at the ends of the scale than ever before, like people have migrated, right? Or are they saying that the substance of those beliefs found at the ends of the scale has changed in some important way, like becoming more extreme, whatever that means, for instance, okay? We kind of got to know this before we listen to anything else that, for instance, Chris Hayes has to say. And believe, like I said a moment ago, that he is using this point as a point of setup for the rest of what he has to say, or at least for the initial stages of it. But it's important to stop when there's problems and address them, okay? And I think there's a trick that's going on here. Just to reiterate, there's a difference between, let's talk about the word extreme, because that just came in and you saw almost immediately how it pertains to this in some way. Here's how it pertains. There's a difference between extreme in the purely relational sense, like the conceptual sense, and extreme in the ideological sense, in the sense of ideas and their substance, right? If I have a line with two ends, the ends by definition are extreme with respect to one another in the relational sense. But that doesn't mean that whatever's actually found, right, at those ends, like in substance, like whatever it is that we find there when we go there, is extreme in the ideological sense. In other words, to treat this word, polarization, like this question is not a real question, is just to assume that that's the case. that whatever is found at the end is in substance extreme in virtue of being at the end of the scale, right? It's to equivocate on these two totally different things. Is that clear? And we hear the word extreme all the time now, don't we? I mean, do you understand? Suppose I have an ice cream shop with only 5 flavors. And those flavors are a sort of gradation, a continuum, a scale from vanilla to chocolate or chocolate to vanilla, whatever. So flavor 1 is the most chocolate and flavor 5 is the most vanilla. And suppose I have 10 customers and I take a survey regarding their favorite flavor. And suppose I come out with the following distribution from that survey where four people like flavor 1, 2 people like flavor 3, and 4 more like flavor 5. Remember, 1 and 5 are the extremes. All right. Now, on the surface of it, this is fairly polarized, right? Most folks are found in one of the 2 categories, either liking the most vanilla flavor or liking the most chocolate flavor. And there's a couple stragglers, a couple moderates, right? A couple Mitt Romneys in the middle. Now, suppose, are you with me? So suppose that I add 26 flavors to my inventory. And suppose that a month after doing so, I survey those same 10 customers. Suppose now that I find that 2 people like flavor 1, 2 people like flavor 7, 1 person likes flavor 13, 2 people like flavor 19, 2 people like flavor 25, and 1 guy likes flavor 31. Okay? Do the math. Now, when you look at this new distribution across these 10 people and their preferences, across 31 flavors, rather than across 5, it looks like there's not as much support for the extremes, i.e. the really, really chocolate or the really, really vanilla. After all, in the first distribution, folks were piled up on the ends with only 1 guy in the middle, right? And it looked very polarized. And then after the new flavors were added, the second distribution looked more even, more spread out. People didn't seem to collect at the ends of the scale. So here's the core question. Which distribution is more polarized? Okay? I feel like this is worth dwelling on. That's why I'm putting it at the beginning of this series, because I've already said that. He takes this as a starting point, so I guess we have to as well. Which distribution is more polarized? Well, we don't know. Okay? We don't know until Chris Hayes explains what he means by polarized. If we focus on the number of people holding to the positions categorized as being extremes, then the first distribution looks more polarized. If we focus on the substance of the positions themselves, after all, we just added 26 new positions, right, i.e. flavors, we might say that things are way more polarized in the second distribution because the kinds of positions found at each end, the flavors, right, are way more chocolatey or way more vanilla or way more right and way more left, whatever, than what used to be found at the end when there were only 5 flavors. You see? You see? In other words, or if we reverse the process and our ice cream shop goes from 26 flavors to 5 flavors, and we take a survey, and it turns out that whereas most people's preferences before were spread across the many flavors, and now most either like flavor 1 or flavor 5, the really chocolate or the really vanilla, that might not be a sign, an evidence, whatever you want to, that their preferences have actually changed, but rather that there are now just fewer ways of expressing that preference since there are only 5 flavors. Okay? Does that make sense? If we go backwards like that? What has the political left done? The political left has, in a way, reduced all your moral options, not down to 5, but down to 2. You're either on board with the no holds barred, batshit crazy, philosophically incoherent, culturally suicidal proposals, right? Men in the bathroom with little girls, or you're not. Or you're not, right? And so there's kind of only one of two positions available now, right? Acquiesce to it or don't. Okay? But then, by the same token, then we're equivocating on polarize. It doesn't mean we're more polarized. It means now, right, you've gone crazy. You've changed the flavors, right? You see, it's a trick. There's just fewer ways to express what was very rationally and clearly expressed before. Anyway, that's my comments on the myth of polarization. I think it's clear. I guess we'll see. But I want to get on now to the substance of the conversation that follows from that. So in part 2, that's what we're going to do. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about, are you ready? Neuropolitics. What a word. It's absurd. But more on that later in part 2 of Mind the Gap. This is the 40 Ounce Hemlock podcast, and we'll see you then.